When we first moved into Willow Creek, it felt like stepping into a dream. The neighborhood was perfect. Neat rows of houses with freshly cut lawns, white picket fences lining every street, and flower beds bursting with vibrant colors. My husband, Jack, and I had saved for years to buy this place. Every time I stepped out onto our porch in the morning, coffee mug in hand, I couldn't help but feel proud. This was it, our little slice of happiness. But there was something about Willow Creek that didn't show up in the glossy brochures or during the realtor's cheerful sales pitch. The Homeowners Association, or HOA. At first glance, they seemed harmless enough. A group of neighbors who met once a month to talk about community standards. They sent us welcome packets filled with rules about mailbox colors, holiday decorations, and even what kind of plants were allowed in front yards. To be honest, I barely gave those papers a second look. How bad could it really be? It wasn't until the letter arrived that things started to feel strange. One sunny morning, as I sorted through the usual pile of bills and junk mail, an envelope caught my eye. It had the official HOA logo on it, a tiny blue house, and inside was a formal notice. The words jumped off the page. Your front yard landscaping does not comply with Section 4.2 of the Willow Creek Community Guidelines. Apparently, my wildflower garden, which I'd spent weeks carefully planting, was considered unsightly and needed to be replaced with approved shrubbery by Friday. At first, I laughed. Surely this was some kind of mistake. Wildflowers. Unsightly. Those flowers weren't just random plants. They held meaning. Each packet of seeds came from special places Jack and I had visited together over the years. Lavender from Provence, poppies from California, daisies from a roadside stand in Vermont. Uprooting them felt like erasing pieces of our life together. Still, I decided to call the number listed on the letter, hoping to clear things up. A woman answered, Martha, the HOA president. Her voice was sharp, almost mechanical. Rules are rules, she said flatly, without a hint of sympathy. That's when it hit me. This wasn't going to be easy. As the days passed, I found myself staring at the wildflowers more often, wondering if I should dig them up. But deep down, I knew I couldn't bring myself to do it. Those flowers weren't just part of my garden. They were part of me. Yet, as much as I wanted to ignore the letter, I couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. Something about Martha's tone lingered in my mind, cold and unyielding. For the first time since moving here, Willow Creek didn't feel quite so welcoming anymore. The quiet life we'd imagined was starting to crack, and I had no idea how far the pieces would scatter. Jack tried to calm me down. It's just flowers, he said one evening as he brushed dirt off his hands after mowing the lawn. We'll replant something else. No big deal. He gave me that reassuring smile of his, the one that usually made everything feel okay again. But this time, it didn't work. To me, those wildflowers weren't just plants. They were memories, tiny reminders of the trips Jack and I had taken together before life got busy. The lavender reminded me of walking through fields in Provence, holding hands as the sun dipped below the horizon. The poppies brought back the laughter we shared on a California road trip, windows down and music blaring. Even the daisies, bought from a little roadside stand in Vermont, carried the memory of stopping for ice cream and watching the world go by. Uprooting them felt like tearing pages out of our storybook. Still, I didn't want to cause trouble. Not yet, anyway. So instead of ripping out the entire garden, I compromised. I trimmed back the wildflowers and added a few boxwood hedges along the edges, hoping it would be enough to satisfy Martha and her crew. For a while, it seemed to work, or so I thought. Then came the second letter. This time, it wasn't about the flowers. It was about the wind chimes Jack had hung above our porch. According to the HOA, they violated noise ordinances. Noise ordinances. The chimes barely made a sound unless the wind picked up, and even then, their soft tinkling was soothing, not disruptive. Yet there it was, written in black and white. Remove the wind chimes or face consequences. That night, as Jack climbed up the ladder to take them down, I stood below, arms crossed, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. Who are these people? I muttered under my breath. What gives them the right to tell us how to live? It's not personal, Jack said, trying to sound reasonable. They're just doing their job. But whose job is it to make everyone miserable? I shot back. My voice cracked, and I realized tears were welling up in my eyes. I hated feeling this way, frustrated, powerless, like I was losing control of my own home. This wasn't what we signed up for when we moved here. We wanted peace, not constant scrutiny. As the days went on, I noticed small changes around the neighborhood. Neighbors who used to wave hello now avoided eye contact. Mrs. Harper from next door stopped inviting me over for coffee. Even the kids playing outside seemed quieter, as if they'd been told to keep their voices down. Willow Creek no longer felt warm and inviting. It felt cold, like a place where individuality wasn't welcome. And then there was Martha. She lived 3 houses down, and though I rarely saw her outside, I could feel her presence everywhere. Her name was on every notice, her signature at the bottom of every rulebook. She wasn't just enforcing guidelines, she was shaping the neighborhood in her image. Uniformity over personality, rules over relationships. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, staring at the empty hook where the wind chimes used to hang, I made a decision. I couldn't let this go on. If Martha and the HOA wanted a fight, they were going to get one. But as I thought about it more, doubt crept in. What could I possibly do against an entire organization? And what would happen if I pushed back too hard? For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, I felt truly alone. Determined to fight back, I decided to attend my first HOA meeting. The thought of facing Martha and her committee made my stomach twist, but I couldn't sit back and let them take over my life, or my home, without a word. If they wanted compliance, they were going to have to hear me out. The meeting was held in the community center, a small drab room with flickering fluorescent lights and rows of folding chairs. When I walked in, the air felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath. Martha sat at the head of the table, flanked by her loyal followers, people I recognized from neighborhood barbecues and block parties. They wore polite smiles, but their eyes were sharp, calculating. It was clear this wasn't just a casual gathering. It was a tribunal. I took a seat near the back, clutching my notes tightly. My heart pounded as I waited for my turn to speak. One by one, neighbors stood up to discuss mundane topics: streetlights, parking rules, landscaping budgets. Each speaker was met with nods of approval or murmurs of agreement. No one argued. No one questioned. It was eerie how smoothly everything ran, like a well-oiled machine. Finally, it was my turn. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, and cleared my throat. "Hi," I began, trying to steady my voice. "I understand the importance of keeping our neighborhood looking nice, but don't you think there's room for individuality? Doesn't diversity make us stronger?" The room fell silent. All eyes were on me, some curious, others hostile. Martha tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she needed to solve. "Diversity has its place," she said slowly, her tone measured. "But here in Willow Creek, uniformity ensures property values remain high. We're protecting everyone's investment, including yours." Her words hit hard, but what struck me most was the murmur of agreement rippling through the crowd. These weren't strangers imposing rules on me. They were my neighbors, people I'd wave to every morning, people whose kids played with mine. And yet, none of them spoke up in my defense. As I sat back down, cheeks burning, I realized something terrifying. I was outnumbered. The HOA wasn't just an organization. It was a mindset. Everyone here had bought into it, willingly or not. Conformity was king, and anyone who stepped out of line risked becoming an outsider. After the meeting, a few neighbors approached me, offering awkward smiles and half-hearted apologies. "It's nothing personal," one man said, patting my shoulder. Just try to see it from their perspective. From whose perspective? I wanted to snap, but I bit my tongue. Instead, I nodded politely and walked away, feeling more isolated than ever. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I replayed the meeting in my mind. Martha's calm demeanor, the cold stares from the crowd, the way no one dared challenge her. It all felt wrong. This wasn't about protecting property values or maintaining order. It was about control, pure and simple. And now, I was caught in the middle of it. Things escalated quickly after that meeting. Every minor infraction became a battleground, and it felt like the HOA had their eyes on us 24/7. One week, it was our mailbox, slightly crooked after a storm. The next, it was the string lights we'd strung up for Christmas. Too bright, the notice said. Too bright. They were warm white bulbs, barely noticeable unless you stood right under them. But according to the HOA, they violated Section 8.3 of the Lighting Decorum Policy. Each new violation notice felt like a slap in the face. It wasn't just the rules themselves. It was the tone, the implication that we were somehow ruining the neighborhood. Worse still, it wasn't just Martha anymore. Other neighbors started chiming in, leaving passive-aggressive notes on our door or muttering complaints when they thought I couldn't hear. Even Mrs. Harper, who used to bring over fresh-baked cookies, now avoided making eye contact. The tension seeped into every corner of our lives. Jack tried to stay calm, reminding me that it was just a house and not worth losing sleep over. But it was worth it, to me at least. This wasn't just about rules or property values. It was about freedom. Could we really call this place home if we weren't allowed to make it ours? One evening, as I watered the sad remnants of my garden, Mrs. Harper finally approached me. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder as if someone might be watching. "You're stirring up trouble," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "Be careful, dear. You don't want to end up like the Millers." "The Millers?" I asked, frowning. I'd heard whispers about them before, the family 2 streets over who'd moved away suddenly last year, but no one ever talked about why. Mrs. Harper hesitated, then shook her head. "Never mind. Just play by the rules." Her warning lingered long after she left, gnawing at me. What had happened to the Millers? Why did everyone seem so afraid to talk about them? And why did I feel like I was walking down the same dangerous path? That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going on beneath the surface. Willow Creek wasn't just strict, it was suffocating. Rules weren't suggestions here, they were commandments. Break them, and you risked more than fines or letters. You risked becoming an outcast. I spent hours lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Mrs. Harper's words in my mind. Was she trying to warn me, or scare me into submission? Either way, it worked. For the first time since moving here, I felt genuinely afraid, not just of the HOA, but of what might happen if I kept pushing back. But fear isn't always paralyzing. Sometimes it fuels determination. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let them win. Whatever secrets the HOA was hiding, I was going to find out. Because one thing was clear, if I didn't stand up for myself now, there would be nothing left of the life Jack and I had built here. Curiosity got the better of me. Over the next few days, I started digging into the HOA's history, determined to uncover the truth about the Millers and what had really happened to them. It wasn't easy. Most records were buried deep in public archives or hidden behind vague legal jargon. But bit by bit, I pieced together a story that chilled me to the bone. I began with old newsletters from the HOA, which were posted on their website. At first glance, they seemed harmless enough. Updates about community events, reminders about landscaping rules, cheerful messages from Martha about keeping Willow Creek beautiful. But as I read between the lines, a darker pattern emerged. There were frequent mentions of non-compliant residents being fined or pressured to leave. Names like the Millers appeared occasionally, always accompanied by vague phrases like amicable resolution reached or property successfully transitioned. Next, I turned to local news articles. A quick search revealed a small blurb from last year about a house fire on Maple Street. The Miller's address. The official report blamed faulty wiring, but something about the wording struck me as odd. Witnesses claimed the flames spread unusually fast, and firefighters mentioned finding signs of tampering near the electrical panel. No charges were filed, and the case was closed within weeks. Most neighbors stopped talking about it altogether, as if pretending it never happened would make it go away. The more I learned, the angrier and more frightened I became. This wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was about control. Fear kept people in line, not respect or fairness. And now, I was walking the same dangerous path as the Millers. One evening, I decided to pay a visit to Mrs. Harper. She'd been kind to me once, and maybe she'd share more if I pressed her gently. When I knocked on her door, she looked surprised and wary. "What is it?" she asked, glancing around nervously. "I need to know the truth," I said softly. "About the Millers, about this neighborhood. Please." She hesitated, then stepped aside and let me in. Her living room was cozy, filled with knickknacks and framed photos, but the air felt heavy. After closing the curtains, she sat down across from me and sighed. "You're treading dangerous ground," she said, "but since you won't let it go." The Millers refused to cut down a tree in their backyard. It was an old oak home to owls. They fought the HOA for months, refusing to back down. Then one night, their house caught fire. No one knows for sure what happened, but things like that don't happen without reason here. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. "Are you saying someone did it on purpose?" She didn't answer directly, but her silence spoke volumes. "Just be careful," she repeated. "Martha doesn't tolerate defiance. If you push too hard, you might regret it." As I walked home that night, my mind raced. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was terrifying. The HOA wasn't just strict, it was ruthless. Rules weren't guidelines. They were weapons, and anyone who dared challenge them risked losing everything. For the first time, I questioned whether staying in Willow Creek was worth it. But even as doubt crept in, a stubborn part of me refused to give up. If the HOA thought they could intimidate me into submission, they were wrong. Whatever it took, I was going to fight back and expose the truth. The HOA's final ultimatum arrived on a cold, gray morning. It was delivered not by mail this time, but in person. Martha herself stood at my doorstep, flanked by 2 other committee members. Their expressions were grim, almost rehearsed, as if they'd practiced this moment beforehand. Martha held out an envelope, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is your last chance," she said, her voice icy. "Compliance within 30 days, or we'll take further action." I stared at the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. I didn't need to open it to know what it contained. A list of demands, deadlines, and thinly veiled threats. My wildflowers, the wind chimes, even the color of our shutters, all of it had to go. But beneath the surface, the message was clear: conform or leave. As they turned to walk away, I called out, "What happens if I don't comply?" Martha paused, glancing over her shoulder. Her smile was faint but chilling. "Let's just say, things can get complicated." Then she walked off, leaving me standing there with the weight of their ultimatum pressing down on me. That night, Jack and I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope lying between us like a ticking bomb. He looked exhausted, running his fingers through his hair. "Maybe we should just do what they want," he said quietly. "It's not worth losing everything over." "Is that what you really believe?" I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. "Because if we give in now, we're letting them win. This isn't about flowers or wind chimes anymore. It's about standing up for ourselves." Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. "I get it, okay. But what are we supposed to do? Fight the entire neighborhood? We're outnumbered." He wasn't wrong. The odds were stacked against us, but giving up felt worse than fighting. And deep down, I knew we couldn't let fear dictate our lives. Willow Creek was supposed to be our home, not a prison ruled by Martha's iron fist. Over the next few days, I started documenting everything. Every notice, every interaction, every whispered warning from neighbors. I recorded it all. I took photos of my garden, the wind chimes, even the crooked maillocks. I reached out to former residents online, searching for anyone else who had clashed with the HOA. Slowly, I began connecting the dots, uncovering a pattern of intimidation and retaliation that stretched back years. One name kept coming up: Mr. Thompson, a retired lawyer who had once lived on the outskirts of Willow Creek. According to rumors, he'd tried to sue the HOA after they fined him for painting his garage door blue. His case was dismissed under mysterious circumstances, and he moved away shortly afterward. Desperate for answers, I tracked him down and arranged a meeting. When I met Mr. Thompson at a coffee shop outside town, he seemed wary but willing to talk. Over steaming cups of coffee, he confirmed my worst fears. "They play dirty," he said, leaning forward. "Fines, inspections, public shaming. It's all designed to wear you down. And if that doesn't work," he trailed off, shaking his head, "just be careful. Once you cross them, there's no going back." His words stayed with me long after we parted ways. I knew the risks, but something inside me refused to back down. If the HOA wanted a fight, they were going to get one. But this time, I wouldn't face them alone. Armed with evidence and newfound allies, I prepared for the battle ahead. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: Willow Creek would never be the same again. The day of reckoning came sooner than I expected. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Martha and her committee arrived at our house, clipboard in hand and cameras slung over their shoulders. They weren't alone. Several neighbors trailed behind them, some holding smartphones to record the spectacle. Word had spread quickly about my refusal to comply, and it seemed everyone wanted a front-row seat to see how this would play out. Martha knocked on the door, her expression unreadable. When I opened it, she wasted no time. "You've been given ample opportunity to rectify the violations," she said, her voice carrying an edge of triumph. "Since you've chosen not to cooperate, we're left with no choice but to enforce the covenants." I stepped outside, closing the door firmly behind me. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every neighbor who had ever felt silenced or powerless under the HOA's thumb. "Go ahead," I said, meeting her gaze. "But know this: I'm done letting you bully people into submission." For a moment, Martha looked taken aback, but she quickly recovered. She gestured to one of her committee members, who began reading from a prepared statement about fines, liens, and potential legal action. As they spoke, I pulled out my phone and started recording. Every word they said, every smug glance exchanged between them. It was all being documented. Then I turned the camera toward the crowd of neighbors. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting awkwardly as they realized they were being filmed. Others glared at me, clearly unhappy that I was making a scene. But a few, just a handful, nodded subtly, silently showing support. Those small gestures gave me strength. When the committee finished their speech, I held up my own stack of papers. "Before you proceed," I said, my voice steady, "you should know I've already sent copies of these documents to the local news station, a lawyer specializing in homeowner rights, and several investigative journalists." I let that sink in before continuing. They include evidence of harassment, intimidation, and possible misconduct by the HOA, including what happened to the Millers. The color drained from Martha's face. For the first time, she looked unsure of herself. The crowd murmured uneasily, and even some of her loyal followers exchanged nervous glances. Whatever power dynamic had kept the HOA in control for so long was beginning to crack. Over the next few weeks, the story blew up. Reporters swarmed Willow Creek, interviewing residents and digging into the HOA's history. Former neighbors came forward with their own stories of unfair treatment. Even Mrs. Harper found the courage to speak out, confirming suspicions about the Millers' fire. Public pressure mounted until the city council stepped in, launching an official investigation into the HOA's practices. In the end, Martha resigned, and the HOA was dissolved. New leadership took over, promising transparency and fairness. While the scars of what happened would always remain, something beautiful emerged from the chaos, a renewed sense of community. Neighbors who had once avoided each other now gathered for barbecues and block parties. People laughed again. Life returned to Willow Creek. As for Jack and me, we kept the wildflowers. And the wind chimes. Our home finally felt like ours, not just a house bound by rules meant to stifle individuality. Looking back, I realized the fight wasn't just about standing up to the HOA. It was about reclaiming our voice. And in doing so, we reminded everyone that sometimes breaking the mold is worth it, even if it means risking everything.